So, welcome to Dice and Duty Around the World, our second podcast format, this time in English. So, I really hope for all our new English listeners that I don't slaughter your language as much as I think I do. And I hope more that you find it someone entertaining to hear me and my co-hosts ranting and talking and discussing about everything Warmachine. And we have a guest with us, but first I may to introduce myself. My gaming tech nickname, where most people know me in the gaming scene, is Candy Trash, aka Pascal. And with me is my co-host. May you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi there, folks. My name is Jan, aka Mini Faction 1, and currently I don't play any Warmachine, which is sad. I want to play Convergence, but I can't.
Of course, you would play if you could, but yeah, I think everyone knows why nobody of us plays right now. So we don't have and don't really want to thematize that because we want to entertain you. And to have a little bit like audio clickbait, we have a big name of the Warmachine community with us for our first international episode. May you introduce yourself?
Hey folks, I'm Rebecca Banky. I've played all of the factions in this game and do love Warmachine. When I'm not under quarantine, I record a small YouTube product called Arcane Assist with Evan and a variety of other contributors. And I've been on the Canadian WTC team a couple of times and have attended a few conventions and played in a few events. It's a pleasure to be on your inaugural episode. Thanks for inviting me, folks.
Of course. I was immediately in the Arcane Assist mode.
Yeah, sorry.
Perfectly fine.
Sometimes I just fall into like, hey folks, welcome to another episode of Nope, I'm sorry, I'm answering the phone.
Yeah, so sort of, right. Okay, shall we start with the interrogation?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we sort of discussed it a little bit beforehand, but since Arcane Assist has been a little bit absent in recent time, will it continue? And what's the state of Arcane Assist?
Yeah, so Arcane Assist took a bit of a break last year for a couple of reasons. The experience of some rebranding, doing some work on myself and figuring out some answers to transition-related questions and what that meant for the channel. Ultimately, that coming up process was very positive, both for me and also for our community in the channel, and that's been really cool. So, we've got a bunch of content where I record under one name and then some more content where I record under a new name, and that felt really great. We're excited about getting into the swing of things there, but then Evan and we actually work together outside of the channel. I manage a board game shop, and he's one of my staff there. And we lost a staff member, so we were both really strapped, working really hard, spending 40 or 60 hours a week trying to make sure we had everything still functioning as it needs to. So we didn't have time to do any recording. So we took a little unscheduled break just until we finished the hiring process, got someone in, got them trained, and we're ready to go. I left for GAMA, which is a trade convention for board game shops and publishers in Reno. And I went to GAMA under the full expectation that when I got back, we were going to really put priority on doing some recording again. While I'm at GAMA, the world pandemic situation changed. And when I got back, I was under 14 days of isolation for having traveled outside the country, and then proceeded to continue that self-isolation because it's the safer choice to make right now. And I think a lot of folks in the world are trying to be a bit more responsible. Evan has had some symptoms that he doesn't really have the opportunity to identify, and we're not really testing people who have some symptoms but are able to isolate. So we've both been at home, filling our time with digital connection that has not yet included the ability to record Warmachine games for our lovely viewers. So as soon as things have returned to normal, or even we're capable of doing some smaller gatherings, I think Evan and I would like to get together again and produce some content, make videos for you folks. We both still love the game a lot. Evan's in the middle of painting up a whole bunch of strange bedfellows models, and is really excited to play some Crix Virgins, as it were. And I'm staring at a beautiful bag full of gorgeously painted infernals and Manoff models that work for Infernals. So
Okay,
it's just here. It's just sitting here doing nothing.
Yeah, so there will be some strange bedfellows versus Infernals games coming up.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool
it's
because
a weird matchup. We should talk about that at some point. But it's a fun game. We've got tons of stuff we want to do, and there's a whole bunch of like themes that we want to record with and stuff that's really interesting to try out. And as people who have played a lot of factions, both of us, the way the game is right now is especially interesting. And I think we'll probably dig more into that later in the episode. But I'm excited to talk about Warmachine because I've been really feeling the lack.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
yeah, I
Okay.
think so as well. As you said, we will talk later in the episode a bit deeper about strange bedfellows and such things. So you said something about staying in touch digitally. So how are you staying active in the hobby during this crisis?
Well, our local shop is doing curbside pickup and delivery, so I've managed to get paints and brushes, and I've got a handful of models that are unpainted that I've got some assembly work to do, and we've got a pretty good, just like a Facebook group chat where all of our local Warmachine players all chat and stuff, and that's included a lot of list dojoing and showing pictures of the models that we're painting and the stuff that we've actually had the opportunity to work on during this period of time. Everyone keeps joking that our meta is going to finally be fully painted thanks to this particular experience. So it's a fun way to stay connected to those folks. I was actually talking with a friend the other day, and I really relate the moment we're in right now culturally to having a second break season in the kind of con-going circuit. We used to talk about the period, this is North America specific, but I'm sure you have something of an equivalent, between Warfare Weekend, previously Warmachine Weekend, which happens, the beginning of November, and Captain Con or Temple Con, the first convention that really happens in January, February, beginning of February, that chunk of time of about 2.5 months as the sort of off season for folks who attend a lot of cons, and I numbered myself among them for a long time. And that period of time was always a period of creativity in Warmachine. It was when the best players would sit down and say, okay, what does the game look like, and what do I do with this? What crazy wild tech can I come up with? What do lists look like that could sort of break things apart? And what are the most powerful things that I can play around with? And those new releases that I've kind of ignored while really refining my list during the active season, where do they fit into this metagame? And I think we're kind of having a moment a little bit like that now. If you sort of imagine the shape of a year as a brainstorming session that lasts 2.5 months long, and then a tweaking session that lasts for nearly 8. That's kind of how the Warmachine circuit went if you were a competitive player for a chunk of time. And I feel like right now we've kind of gotten an excuse to have a second brainstorming session, an opportunity to kind of play around and figure out the game and get really creative and flex some unusual lists. So I expect the minute we come back, there's going to be a lot of weird and a lot of really interesting, and it's going to be kind of bad for a bit, but then we'll have an opportunity to refine it again.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we have such a break in Germany, but that may be because the lack of such big conventions like you have it in the North American part of the world. We have more conventions now because 2 or 3 people basically do some around Germany, but
Right.
It's the same team of people, and it's normally around 60 to 100 people or something, and not thousands.
Sure, but still, that's a fun crew. Do you get the sense, just out of idle curiosity, that makes the German meta more narrowed into the tuning phase of list building, or more open to the kind of creative lists that are not necessarily optimized but do something a little bit different or a little bit interesting?
I would say it's more fine-tuning, especially because some colleagues of us have talked to it with Thomas Musser over in Boosted Roles a few weeks before. The German meta is kind of isolating.
Okay.
Should be the English name for it, not because we want, but just because it's such a closed system. Basically, all tournaments and conventions and such things going online via T3 tabletop tournaments. And it's, as far as I know, only German-speaking calendar base. And yeah, it's hard for other for people who speak other languages go in there and just sign up for something because they can't read it. And I think that's part why the German meta is so isolated, and just see the meta of the other world, of the rest of the world. Sorry, that sounds strange. At WTC or at battle reports like yours of Arcane Assist, and maybe, I mean, the German WTC teams always are ranked really high, and
Yeah.
the players are really competitive. But I think sometimes a look around the corner would be good for them. And I think there it's not good that the German meta is such isolated, because it mustn't with French around the corner. The French team is also very strong, and the Polish meta. And yeah, there could be more interaction.
Yeah, I also think it's kind of a cultural thing. Like, right? We're Germans. We don't have humor, and we're efficient. There's sort of a tendency in the meta, especially for tournament lists, that's really about tweaking and optimizing, and not really. So you have new models come out, and then you have, I would say, a phase of 2 months, sort of like until everybody has the models, and within those 2 months, like certain list concepts, and then the specific lists themselves emerge, and then this is sort of what you play, and they tend to dominate the meta then in a way that you sort of always go like, okay, I either do something really crazy to circumvent this, or I sort of have to pick my own top tier list to stand against it. Now player level withstanding there, but this is a tendency we have here. So it's often crazy when this is why I like watching your videos, because sometimes you're like lists like, what the hell is this? Yeah. Okay, and then you're like, okay, it works, and I think for myself, then sometimes discussing with colleagues is like, yeah, this is a nice list, but no, it would be like more efficient if you put this in and this out. It's like, yeah, okay, true. Yes, and I think this is what Pascal said. This is sort of a problem since our meta is a little bit isolated.
It's funny. It's interesting because I mean, again, my experience is North American and Canadian specific, and I say North American in a pretty broad way because a lot of the people who sort of interact with each other and talk and tech together are the people who make friends at traveling North American conventions. I'm as likely to dojo a list with somebody from Seattle as I am with somebody from an hour away from me in Canada. But having said that, I remember playing as a WTC team, preparing to play against the German team. And I had friends who'd attended the event even before I was a player or a captain there. And they'd always talk about the Germans as people who were like, as a team, as a culture of their WTC competitors. They'd spend a lot of time grinding at the matchups. They'd know their lists inside and out. Nobody would bring a list that they had just, changed at the last minute because they thought it was a good meta read. Everyone would be preparing things that were very, very, very strong and very solid. And I can't recall exactly who it was, but I was having a conversation with one of the German players, and we were talking about a matchup. It was a Scar 1 mirror. And, I said, I thought the pairing process would be interesting. It would have been interesting to see if we landed on the Scar 1 mirror. And he said, oh, you lose that round because our player has a Death Ripper.
Okay.
And I was just completely blown away by the notion that, like, the idea that one difference in the list just 100% resolved the question. And obviously there's some penchants for exaggeration, but the idea that, like, iterations on a list that bring you to the perfect version mean that matchup is solved is very foreign to the way that I play Warmachine, which is a very pressure-oriented style, a very push things forward and play the pieces in front of me in an unexpected way that forces my opponent to make mistakes. Very different from, I'm going to choose the optimal line every single turn, and by making that sequence better or more effectively or with better tools than you, I'm going to beat you in the game. Just a different style, and it's really interesting to see those styles kind of clash with each other.
I can imagine. This sounds totally German.
Yeah, the German Warmachine playing style is very mathematical, and I really have to laugh for myself a little bit right off the micro, because right now in the biggest German forum, the biggest German page, it's called page 5, there is an offline game which is only mathematics. It's someone asks questions, and it's always something like, okay, so this are your things on the table, like you have a 50-point list and your dice always falling like you need it, and now show me which combos you can get to get one model as far as up the table as you can. And there's only such questions. So
Yeah.
it's exactly that.
Yes, well, one question was, so you have, I think, a 50-point list, and what is the furthest you can move an enemy model around? Dice are rolling perfectly however you want. And immediately was like, okay, this is probably going to be a Ran thing, like with the battle mages, right, dragging
Right.
them around. It ended up being, Pascal, do you know what? I think it was Helga 2 with some slams.
Yep.
And you can basically place your models on the table any way you want, and it's like just really pure mathematics. And Ran was like 80 inches, and Helga got like 140
Yeah.
or something.
It got
Yep.
Okay, what
pretty
the hell?
absurd universes there.
Do your slams move 3.5 inches or do they move 6?
I think it's 6.
Okay,
Should
yeah,
fix-
no, Helga wins that. I don't know, like this is a total tangent, but I don't know if you folks have played much Helga in the current meta, but Brad Park, who was a friend of mine and a guy who came to the OTC, was playing this amazing Helga 1 list, and Flutwig the Filcher is just so money in that list.
I haven't seen her here in the Southwest meta, I have to admit that. We don't
Check
really
it-
have that many mercenary players like here in our corner, Germany. So I don't know, but
Yeah,
sounds fun.
check it out sometime.
Minions.
If that interaction is not
Minions,
immediately
yeah,
obvious, Flutwig the Filcher is a little frog man who can walk and jump and has a 4-inch reach tongue attack. That's a melee attack with pull. And then when he hits something, he gets a coin, which he can use to boost attack or damage rolls. And then he also has rapid strike. So you, in an ideal circumstance, you like have your Void Archon kill something and teleport like behind their caster, and then your little frogman jumps in and he tongue whips the caster, pulls them, slams them into the Void Archon for an extra die of damage, plus your Dark Shroud, plus the boost he's got access to,
Oh my
and
god.
then he pulls them after resolving the slam any distance and makes a second slam tongue attack on them. So it's pretty
Okay,
amazing.
this sounds good. This sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely awesome. Yes.
It's a super non-linear threat range. It goes for days. You've got access to tools like dash. So like it's just, you're in the West and you can't protect yourself from this insane little frogman. The list, like, it incidentally wants things like 2 units of Pharaoh Valkyries. So you've got shield guards to deliver your pieces, and you've got multiple Void Archons. Like it's a cool list.
Okay,
Anyway,
sounds
so
fun.
it's good nonsense.
after
should,
our podcast going online, Flakwack with Filcher sold out in every German store.
Yeah, there's a bunch of the Riot Quest models that I think people have kind of like overlooked or not really thought about, because they're two things. One, they're rules dense, and two, they're easy to underappreciate because they tend to be like mid to expensive solos that aren't maybe the most exciting combat solos or have utility that's not very straightforward. And that's an environment where the kind of creativity that we've got access to right now is really thriving. I've just been spending a bunch of time rereading all the Riot Quest model rules because it's a lot of releases and really
Oh
quickly.
yeah, that's true.
To finish that part of the discussion and going along, just a quick thoughts from mine on that, because I really agree with that. I had a discussion with a friend of mine a few weeks ago, and he's absolutely raging about how is the dwarf with the 2 pistols called?
The Rulik Archon.
Yeah, the Rulik Archon. We just call him
Hallo.
the Rulik Archon. Hallo
He's
Holdemai. Yeah,
insane.
right. I play
Yeah.
him in my Fiona list, and he likes to shoot stalkers. That is something he can really, he does really well. And my opponent, my good friend Money, was so raging about him and how overpowered all these Riot Quest solos are. And there's guys also coming along who can blow away whole units and such things. And I said, yeah, but I think look at combo solos from before a few years. Yeah, so what do you have? You had this dude from Lale with his Weapon Master Sword and Tough. I even don't know what's his name. Of
Yeah.
Terran de la Russie. And
The Wanderer or whatever?
yeah, something. And that was your average combat solo. And of course, nobody picked them because they don't do work on the table. You picked port solos and other pieces which do work, and combo solos wasn't quite there. And now they're coming along all these Riot Quest solos, and there you have solos like Harlow Hold'em or Scythe or Death or Flakwack. And these are combat solos who do something on the table.
It's funny that you mentioned like combat solos in that role, because I had a good conversation with Mike Ireland, who was really struggling to make ret click for a good chunk of time earlier in this edition. And one of the points that he made is just, combat solos are kind of trash, but then he was playing defenders before the recent theme changes, and he said, like, I'm just going to take all the dumb combat solos and just cram as many of those in. And there is a kind of threshold for combat solos, like a sort of point where you can saturate your list with sufficient number of them. And this is a big and, if you have a caster who can sufficiently deliver them, that's a pretty effective line of play. You mentioned Fiona. I think she's maybe the premier example in Mercs of being able to deliver a bunch of powerful combat solos.
Yeah,
and the
absolutely.
lists that we've seen from Fiona resemble like late Mark II Haley 2 lists. If you folks played then or are familiar with those lists.
Yeah, I'm
not.
familiar
I
with
started
this.
with Mark III, so
I started at the end with Mark II, so I get the whole Haley 2 nonsense.
Yeah, and the thing that was so powerful about Haley 2, I mean, she had a good kit, but she had a feat that enabled delivery, which Fiona does, and she leveraged pretty strong tools from just the best possible models to deliver. And then she could arc powerful spell slinging to negate the opposing thing on the other side of the table. And I feel like Fiona is kind of all of those things.
I one time get wrecked from, I think Wout is his name, the Belgian team captain.
Yeah, I know what. I lost to him at the WTC.
And he absolutely wrecked me with Haley 2. It was fun.
Yeah, he's a good player, and a good player with Haley 2 is terrifying.
Absolutely. And I'm a bad player, and it was just over turn 2, and I don't really had the pleasure to play the game with him. It was more like I'm looking what he do, and then the game is over.
Yeah, we had a similar experience. He and I played in Poland on the 3rd year, as it were, and we played in the first round against the Belgian team, and they were talking tech quietly, and we had to explain to them that we also spoke enough French that they should probably give us some more space than that. But he and I got paired, and it was Magnus 2 on a scenario where Magnus 2 sort of rules the school, and he utterly crushed me. I wasn't even really participating in the game, so it was good fun.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe we jump back on our train. So
yeah, totally. Sorry.
The next questions come from Jan.
Yeah, so it's sort of regarding Arcane Assist during shutdown. Have you considered streaming Vassal games?
Considered, yes. One of the challenges associated with that is I don't know the Vassal platform super well, and I feel like it's something where you want to have a bit of practice and a bit of experience with it to sort of produce content that, I don't know, I guess sings at the level that I like our content to sing. So I don't mind the idea of producing it as free content once I have a bit of a better grasp of it. But I don't want to bring any like Vassal content to like our Patreon service where I'd charge people for it. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that yet, right? Maybe if this lockdown lasts endlessly and people are really clamoring for it, then I would maybe consider it. But for the time being, I'd like to play around Vassal. I'd like to learn more about it. I'd like to understand the interface. I think, previously I'd been very anti-Vassal because even if the quality of play or my opponent is less good, I want to play Warmachine in a tactile way where the physical experience of holding the pieces builds in me the muscle memory necessary to succeed with them. And also because I play this game to be social and to be connected to people and to kind of communicate with folks in person. And Vassal doesn't do some of those things for me the way that I want them to. But this is an unusual time in the world. And we're all looking to do different things. So I wouldn't rule it out.
Okay. So when there will be the first Vassal video popping up, we know that the shutdown was too long.
Yeah.
Time was spent there. Okay.
And Rebecca did a kind of challenge, so maybe we see in the not so far future a game of Rebecca against some German WTC player, because in our rambling before the podcast, Rebecca said she is unbeaten by German players. So I think there is
So
something.
far, and that's not a comment on the capability of German players by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, you
But,
cannot get out of there. No take backs.
it is true that I have not lost a game at the WTC to a German player. I've only played 3 times and only against 2 players. It was poor Bernard twice, and it was Litzy, who was an absolute gentleman in the game that we played, and a delight to play against. But both of them, I think, I caught quite by surprise, and I do not think either of them were expecting quite the way that I chose to play that game. So it was good fun.
It worked.
We had a nice time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nice.
so the next question we normally would have for you would be, what have you been playing recently? But if you don't Wrestling, I don't think you play at all right now.
I mean, I did attend a small convention immediately before the lockdown, which is the Ontario Team Championships. That was the beginning of March, so like a month ago. But that was an event that I participated in with Infernals, and I'd like to continue to play Infernals for the time being. I'm very much enjoying the faction. They're a delight to play, and they're deeper than I gave them credit for initially, and I give them credit for being fairly deep. So that says quite a bit to me.
Yeah, it says that you're totally evil. I just hate them.
Yeah, no, I'm not
I plainly hate
totally
them.
evil. Just like a mixed bag of evil, I think is more on point. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, they're a super evil faction, and they're really fun to
Okay,
play.
and what are you looking forward to play? Is there something in mind which you say, okay, when this whole mess get over, I will play first this list and this caster or such things?
Oh, that's a good question. Again, I attended the OTC, the Ontario Team Championships, and due to a variety of things, mostly the fact that I had to work like 60 or 70 hours, I didn't get the OTC practice time I'd hoped for. So I ended up blocking lists that I didn't know especially well, or lists that I hadn't had the time to practice because our list lock was a month or so before the event, and I expected to be able to grind out a whole bunch of games after that. I went home to visit my family, and I dealt with a whole bunch of things, and then I got back and I said, okay, time to start really playing some Warmachine seriously and recording videos again and really getting into it. And then we had the staff issue, so I had to go to the OTC, having played the lists that I expected to play. Basically, one of them 3 times and the other one never at all. I played some versions of Zadaroth, some different iterations of that list a few times, and I liked it a lot, but I had not played like that specific version. And it included a few key pieces of tech that I'd not played around with a little bit before, and was probably a little bit more support loaded than I wanted it to be. So those were the considerations that were going into my mind when I was deciding, what am I going to do this weekend? What are these lists going to be like? And I'm a big fan of both the lists, but especially the Fiora 3 list. I don't know if it's become very popular in your meta. I presume it has, because I think the list is quite strong. But Fiora 3 in Infernals is something else. She's really fun. I like that the way they've treated the sort of the Warmachine casters who come over to the Infernals faction is to take sort of C+ at best Warmachine casters and give them exactly the tools they need to thrive in a different, more interesting kind of place. So that's a really cool way to handle like hybrid casters or hybrid factions.
Oh, that's interesting, because I think the most I've seen here is Zataroth and Omodamos
Or Stone.
as a pair.
Yeah.
What does Fiora do, or what does make her great? Because this is sort of the next topic where I want to talk about is the cross-faction models and themes. Your opinions there? Because I mean, there have been quite a few that came out. So care to talk a bit about the Fiora 3?
Yeah, absolutely. She's maybe my favorite right now. I think there's a lot to make her great, but the biggest thing for me is that she's an insight caster. Caster in Warmachine right now has a tendency to just die, right? Like that's the kind of issue is, Veil 1 is less exciting than she used to be because she can't retreat sufficiently with her feet. And the insight casters who are worth playing right now are the ones that can cast insight and live on the following turn. So the big deal for Fiora is in Infernals, she can do that. The theme lets her get her upkeeps out early, which is important because Banishing Ward can be a really key spell in a lot of matchups. And she would like to be able to cast it, but really can't when she wants to take board presence and do the things she wants to do, which includes cycling Redline. Starting the game with Redline means you can have a couple of jacks even further up, but the biggest thing that she's about is she's a stats multiplier. So the list that I'm playing, which I borrowed partly from the list that Travis played, but I've also seen a couple of other people playing it around, is a max unit of cleansers with the UA. And it's really fun to have your opponents say, what are cleansers and what do they do? Because no one plays those models.
What are cleansers and what do they do?
Indeed. Cleansers are a infantry unit that is 11-14 with Ashen Veil. So kind of trash stats, but that's fine. They have a spray, which is a spray 8, rat 5, pow 12. So nothing super exciting to write home about, and it's fire typed. They have an officer who gives them assault as a tactic and as a mini feat to turn the spray into spray 10 instead of spray 8 for a turn. So obviously none of those things sound sufficiently exciting to make them a unit you'd want to play, which is true. But in Fiora, you have access to the following things. Obviously, you're a Menoth list, so you've got Severius 0. That makes them all of a sudden 12-13, which is a lot more exciting. Fiora's character Jack has Fuel for the Flames, the same rule that you'll see on Midnight Archons, but Infernals don't have access to cheap versions of this. That rule gives you another +2 damage. That takes them from 13 to 15. You've got access to Insight, which takes them to Rat 8 and POW 17. And then potentially you've got access to a Hermit buff that takes them to POW 19 on those sprays, which are pretty good. The list is filled out with a few other pieces that I think are pretty great, but the theme continues to be just play a whole bunch of sprays. You have Repenters. Repenters are the Menoth Light Jack. They end up being pretty reasonable, pretty sturdy. They have a similar spray to the Cleanser sprays. Fiora has 2 of them in her battle group, along with her character Jack, who also has a similar to a Cleanser spray. Severius has 2 of them in his Warpath battle group. They're great at the whole doing the spray thing, but with the combination of Warpath, which you can usually trigger pretty easily with access to sprays, and his Jack's ability to move, they've got decent threat and a little bit of variable in threat. Fiora's Jacks have access to Redline for their little bit of variable in threat. Those models can also get the benefits of Insight plus Severius plus their melee attacks or chain weapons, and they can have Redline for another +2 strength. So they can end up hitting pretty hard. And then again, also you have a Hermit for the Hermit buff potentially. Yeah. And then you also have a Choir. So you can also apply the +2 damage from the Choir. So that obviously applies nicely to their sprays. That applies nicely to their melee attacks. So you end up with the Repenter sprays are base POW 12, goes to 13 with Severius, goes to 15 with the Choir, goes to 17 with Insight, goes to 19 with Fuel for the Flames. So a bunch of POW 19 sprays, which you can boost because they all have access to 1, 2, maybe 3 focus a turn if you need it. You can accumulate off your soulless models, which in this list are the model that Regina brings to the table, and Umbral Guardians, of which you have 2. Fiora can play pretty far up the board with Insight up, Banishing Ward on herself, Valen so she can't be knocked down or made stationary, and she's got a couple of Umbral Guardians. Give her as many as 4 shield guards in the matchups, easy match shield guards. Played this list into Sloan. Fiora felt completely safe the entire game.
So you think cross-faction system is a good idea? Because I think one part said certain factions have been kind of lost there. For example, Legion, Grimkin, and I think they like sort of lost out on the double because they don't have access to other themes or more models from other factions, and they don't have Archons.
Sure. I think it's technically they have a Primal Archon and Legion, but I think it's no surprise that we're seeing the Q3 and Q4 releases slated for Grimkin and Legion as a primary focus where they're getting their kind of big, heavy-hitting Archon style pieces. I think that's exciting, and it's obviously needful. And it's always been the case in Warmachine that different metas and different viabilities of faction have gone through waves, right? The best Legion players in the world are the ones who can kind of ride out the time where Legion's not at the very, very top of the game.
While we're talking about Archons, then the next question fits perfect here. Do you think the Archons were designed as specific counterpicks to Infernals?
Yes and no. I think the Archons are obviously very good against Infernals, and I think the idea of releasing a powerful faction like Infernals and then telling everyone, it's fine, there's things we're introducing into the meta to give you tools against them that plays well into the narrative, that galvanizes the player base to play these really cool tools, and they feel like they're doing it for a purpose, to a specific end. And I think the idea that fielding this Archon isn't that this is just, like, oh, this is a crazy good piece, I'm obviously going to buy it. It's like, it's your weapon against a kind of common enemy. I think a lot of players really resonate with that.
It's interesting. I don't think that's really much the point here in Germany. So once again, we're at the cultural thing. I think here's a sort of okay, you have an Archon or you don't, and if you don't, then you don't have the really most effective points on the table.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think Archons are very good, and I think that's pretty unarguable. And different ones are different than others. John, fellow contributor of Arcane Assist, a good friend of mine, he's been playing a really amazing Dunian Archon themed troll list that he and I, workshopped on a little bit together, and he's taken to the next level, playing a ton of games with it and doing super well. There are places for all of the Archons in the game, and they do quite well. I think they are a bit ubiquitous. I think everyone does want to play Archons because I think Archons are really good. But I think it's also nice that tells a story on the table. And I think Warmachine is best when it's an interesting tactical game, but we're not playing chess. We're playing, a game with a story and dolls that we want to play with. Like, there's something compelling about the game telling that story well.
Okay, I can agree with this.
Yeah, I think so. That's true. And not for last, they are all, I think, beautiful models.
Yeah, I think I'd almost universally agree with that. I really love all the details in the Dunian Archon. I think the Void Archons look like they're sort of otherworldly and a bit ethereal. The Menite Archons are maybe the prettiest ones. The Thamrite Archon has kind of like a Robin Hood vibe going, which I think is cool. The Thamrite Archon might be aesthetically my favorite one, and also the one I least want to put on the table right now, because I just hate rolling D3s.
Oh yeah, I know that problem.
When the Thamrite Archon rolls a 3, it's just busted. It's so strong. Yes. And when it rolls a 1, you wish you'd never brought it.
Yeah, exactly. You're just crying.
It's really interesting because my only experience with a Thamrite Archon was at the team tournament in January. And it was like, I was putting him up. I was playing Kador there. And he was trying to... So he sort of invested it on one side to take out my Kayazi eliminators. He rolled a 1, then he missed, and the next turn I just basically invested 5 points to take away his Archon. And I was like, okay, fine, for me, works.
So bad.
Yeah, I think what I don't really like about the Archons, I mean, this is always, in my humble opinion, of course, they have totally different power levels, I think. So you have on one side you have the Man of Archon, which is like a super hard piece, and you can put it in lists where it goes like, this model just does too much. And then you have the wild thingy there.
Primal Archon.
The Primal Archon. And he just loses out because he's in, I think is it one theme where he is actually a faction model? I think it's only one or two lists where he's a faction model, and I don't think he's on par anywhere near all the others.
We're also in a weird... Okay, so the other thing about the Archons is they're all very strong, and they all have fairly well-defined specific roles. But they cost about the same number of points to Light Warjack, and sometimes they're much better than that, and sometimes they're significantly worse than that. And that's the debate you have to make about them. Not having access to battle group mechanics like boosting, a lot of them have things to make up for that, but sometimes they don't, and sometimes that just means you can't choose to invest a bunch more resources into them and make them much better. They kind of simply are what they are. And they're all good at a thing. And the Primal Archon is, unfortunately, good at the thing right now that our meta is very teched to resolve, which is being a powerful, disruptive anchor piece that holds board presence and pressures board presence. I don't want to play that in a list right now because... So everything's context, right? Like, I think it's a super powerful piece, and in a different meta, it'll be much better, much more interesting. Right now, everything in the world can rip through armor and can remove anchor pieces super simply. So we're playing a game right now of threat ranges and variable defensive statistics holding the board well. in a meta where we weren't playing that kind of game, where everyone was playing a sort of more stat-oriented game, sort of crashing things into each other and focusing on razor-thin valuations of both defense and armor, the Primal Archon would be the best Archon. It's not there right now because it's not the right place for it.
Do you see it changing back to this again, or?
Yeah, no, metas are fluctuating and evolving, and not only with cyclical releases, but with people teching for different things. Primal Archon is interestingly a pretty strong piece against a lot of non-Primal Terror's Legion lists. And I think by the beginning of next year, we might see those kind of lists making a resurgence.
I mean, this is the interesting thing because Privateer Press, I mean, when you look at the release schedule of this year, this is basically nearly nothing, right? So we have Convergence releases end of this month, and then that's it, I think, right?
Well,
until the fourth quarter, or I'm not sure.
We've had quite a few Merc and Minion releases, like the Riot Quest stuff. We had the new Ashland release. We recently just had the Nemo release, the Asphyxius release. Like, those are all pieces that should make a significant impact, and we haven't given them the opportunity to show that. The Nemorb, the Nemo 4, is actually a really significant model that I think is going to reshape Signar, Convergence, and possibly Mercenary lists in some interesting ways.
Imagine good stuff is coming out and no one is playing Warmachine.
Yeah. It's a good. If I was Privateer Press right now, I might take my foot off the gas a little bit and do some internal restructuring, because it's not great to throw a whole bunch of releases to people before they've had an opportunity to adapt with them and get excited about them.
Yeah, but I think they did this, right?
Yes.
So sort of they put out the Convergence stuff for putting it out now, and then you have this big gap for Warcaster, and then you have some like bring up to par releases for Legion and Grimkin, and that's sort of it right now. And the fun thing about this is, so I'm waiting for my new Convergence stuff. Like, I've ordered this when it came out, and I still haven't received it. so the shutdown now sort of plays into the hand that I'm not here like, I want to play it, but I don't have the models. I cannot play. I don't have the models, so I don't lose anything.
One last question before we go over to part 2. You are well known for making unconservatively lists work. Had you any conservatively ideas in mind recently? Like, just to give you an example, Patrick Dunford said on the meta a few months ago he would like to play Striker 1 with a Hurricane and 5 freebooters, so something like that.
That is an amazing list, for the record. The freebooters are, honestly, there's a lot of interesting Warmachine lists out there right now. I think Flames of the Darkness is a very, very flexible theme, and it brings different things for different casters, like different things for different factions even. I think Strange Bedfellows is a list that I want to play quite a bit. I think there's a lot to figure out in that theme. Again, I think this is a creative process we're about to enter, and when I've come out of like some of the more unconventional lists, as I played Borka in Power of Dunia, Borka 2, and that list was absolutely amazing, especially the things it was supposed to do. I think what you want to do is you want to sit down and say, like, what are the things that you need to address? Like, what are the sort of meta problems that you need to find a solution for? And I think with Flames of the Darkness being a very popular list, with Warriors of the Old Faith being a really good list, I think we're seeing a lot of good stats, lots of damage dealing, like really strong protection pieces. And I'd be looking for lists that can skew either above that conversation, which I think is very difficult to do, like the Striker 1 list that Pat's describing, or lists that offer a kind of control element or a threat range element that outclasses those lists. That's maybe not the answer that you're looking for. Like, that's not like spicy tech per se, but the places that I'm looking are lists that have threat ranges that way exceed their other options, and lists that have really, really powerful control elements. So we talked already about Fiona. We talked a little bit about Ashland. Ashland 1 actually has a more interesting threat range on her blockader. Like, you can really pressure some incredible assassinations with just the option to quicken the blockader. That's the kind of thing I'm looking at right now.
Okay, so I think we will do the cut here. And yeah, if you don't fed up with hearing us, we had a little bit of audio problems through the recording, which our listeners might not mention if I'm good at cutting it out. So we will go into more details, a little bit more list discussion with Rebecca in the part 2 of the podcast. And you will find it over on our Patreon site. And yeah, if you will get a patron and helping us to get more content out to you, you will get, of course, early access to everything we do, and of course exclusive content in the future, and exclusive content like the second part of this episode. So until then, I say bye, and yeah, hopefully you listen us again. Bye.
Yep. Bye bye.